Thank you so very much for taking the time to be with us in this presentation. My name is Francis Ojok. I am the founder and CEO of the DC Mediation and Dispute Resolution Institute. Here at the Institute, we provide fast, affordable, and effective dispute resolution services. Today, with great honor, I am delighted to welcome Mr. Samir and Ms. Yasmin, our esteemed speakers, who will present on intercultural competence in mediation, bridging the gap in global dispute resolution. Ms. Yasmin is a legal mediator with a background in forensic investigation and law, specializing in intercultural mediation and negotiation technique. Mr. Samir, on the other hand, is an ADR expert, a highly experienced lawyer qualified to practice law in India, is an ADR trainer, mentor, and a coach. Is also the director of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators India branch and a founder and trustee of ADR Bar. Without further ado, let me invite our esteemed speakers to take the center stage and lead us through this engaging exploration of managing intercultural competence in mediation. Thank you so very much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Francis, for that kind introduction of myself and Yasmin. We are equally delighted to be on this panel today and discuss a very interesting aspect of mediation or conflict resolution, which is related to the cultural aspect of disputes. And what we are gonna do today is I would be inviting Yasmin first to share her thoughts on this topic, and then I would follow her with my thoughts, and then maybe we can have a good conversation on this, and then ends with a Q&A. So Yasmin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Samir. And thank you, Francis. It's an honor to be here and speak for the DC Mediation and Dispute Resolution Institute about a very important topic, intercultural mediation and intercultural elements. And to be honest, if I speak for myself, I see intercultural mediation as a part of mediation itself. So it's not a different branch, because we have here a globalized world where different cultures come together. And it's not only the business part that connects us, but also the big dossiers, I would say, that we share with each other, and bring also the intercultural challenges with it, like climate change, refugee crisis, and we saw in the past the pandemic management. And these are mondial subjects, but they work through in the national culture and also in the national disputes or potential disputes in the future. And to go one step further, it works also in the subcultures. And these all these points we are going to explain further, how they affect mediation and how you can cope with it as a mediator. Because the more insight you have as a mediator in culture and in the cultural elements, the more proactive you can act as a mediator. And you become from just a mediator, you can do more in the case of dispute management. Because it's always better to avoid than to cure as a mediator. And it opens doors. This knowledge and these tools open doors to be more proactive, like pre-mediation, and to avoid potential conflicts. And also, you gain a broader perspective and a sixth sense about the intercultural risks, and do also more in risk management and advice on that part. So it opens doors. And the basics of intercultural competent mediator is that an intercultural competent mediator or person has like a sense of understanding the values and which values play a part in different cultures, with guide us in the decisions we make and our behavior and also our expectations. So in order to be able to intervene more effective during a mediation, you need to know which buttons you should push. And in that case, it's essential to know about it. Intercultural doesn't mean that you need to know everything about every culture, but there are some similarities, some similar topics which appear in every culture, but the values, they are different in every culture. And it's a case of it's important that you're sensitive. It's not about knowing everything. So in that way, you can guide yourself as a mediator or as a dispute manager in very complex, multi-layered, multi-party cases. There is a Dutch sociologue, and he's also a psychologist. That's Professor Geert Hofstede. And he gave us a definition of culture, and he connected it with the values, as I mentioned before. So to begin, before we delve deeper into the different techniques and interventions, it's important to understand what a culture is. And you can see it as a lens from like glasses in the way you see and intervene in the world with people, but also with situations. And the Geert Hofstede, he made like the analogy with a collective mental programming that differentiates one group of people from the other. And the elements that differentiate the one group of the other are the collective learned behavior in that specific context and their upbringing. So as you can see, that doesn't work only in a national culture, but also subcultural or subnational. So even if you do only local cases and you think, well, I don't do international cases, even then it's very important to be like intercultural competent. And in that way, it is a fact that intercultural mediation or dispute management is not just another branch in mediation, like I do only family cases or I do only commercial cases. No, it is a vital tool in between the whole concept of mediation, and doesn't end by one branch. So the cultural dimensions that I mentioned earlier I like the study of Geert Hofstede because it is very systematic, and if you're not if you don't know a culture yet, it's nice to have like some kind of model to prepare yourself, or some universal thing to prepare yourself. So the things that you should be sensitive about is that the things are different in another culture, like the power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, or long-term orientation. If you look at your own culture or at other different cultures, they give a different value to every concept of this system. So in that way, you can guide more. But before you're able to intervene, you have also to analyze your own perceptions. And you can call that like the third perspective, or and that means like you step outside of your own perspective and look at your own values and how you see the world yourself. So, because it can be the case that that these other values are not, they are totally the opposite. And how are you going to react on the spot? And what happens with you internally as a mediator or as a dispute manager? And that's very important to do as a mediator before, like in the proper education part. So you are more effective, because the risk of there are risks if not every mediator is aware of that. If intercultural elements are not treated in the right way, it can escalate an situation or a dispute, because if what happens with different cultures, it is so different that it is in a way is far from yourself, and the risk is that they are becoming a caricature, or dehumanize it if it's totally the opposite, and that can escalate or lead to more polarization in between a case. And another way to deal with certain cases is to be sure that there is enough experience of procedural justice. So that means that the parties have a voice, they feel seen, they feel heard, etc. And to be able to understand what the thing is that they should feel seen in, or heard in, or have a voice in, you should know which topics or values are more sensitive in that case. And in that way, the parties are more flexible because they feel seen and heard, and the positions become also more flexible, and they're more able to move. And even if the outcome of a situation is not the best situation or your wish, even if the outcome is not as you would desire, it's easier to live with the outcome, because your feeling of procedural justice is big enough to be able to live with the outcome. And that's also an outcome of a study. And as I mentioned before, these sensitivity of intercultural differences can also guide you more in the underlying dynamics, the underlying stakes, because what's important for you and the different interests you couple on that subject is different in a different culture. So you need to guide yourself or to navigate in a landscape of different interests and different values, and in that way people act and react different and expect different things in a situation. So yeah, that's in a nutshell. It's not everything, but in a nutshell, why intercultural mediation is important, and some things you can do and to navigate in a certain situation.
Thank you so much for that interesting start to this topic. And I certainly agree with your thoughts about the importance of intercultural aspect in mediation, especially when we are talking about family mediation, the issues, the conflicts in families. Though it is equally applicable in other types of mediation as well, but it is more of importance when the family or relationships intercede, the personal relationships are involved as such. And I agree that ultimately we have to first understand um, what is culture for that matter. Now, in nutshell, if I just summarize what Yasmin said, and the referring to the learned psychologist, according to me, culture is basically the way of life. The way people live their life in different aspect, like and it encompasses a wide areas of our lives, like the way we dress, the way we speak, the way we so language, our way of dressing, communication, rules, and also to an extent it includes traditions for that matter, though there is a difference between the two, but a very thin line of difference, I would say. But yes, so at the end of it, it actually affects the thought process of a person in a very important way. So all what we are thinking, or the way we are behaving, the way we are communicating, ultimately has the reliance on our culture, which is passed on from generation to generation. And that, as I said, affects a person's thought process. And that is exactly is what I'm going to talk about today, is the impact of this thought process from a mediator's perspective. Now, as Yasmin also touched upon the importance of what the mediator's role would be. So the thing is that ultimately, if the culture is uh, forming the ultimate thought process of a person, so if that particular person is playing the role of a mediator, he or she would definitely be affected at some point of time due to this cultural thought process with respect to any issue in dispute between the parties. And therefore, it is very important for the mediator to have the understanding of different culture, especially when the parties are from intercultural, situations. Um, as Yasmin also correctly pointed out, it's not that everything about interculture is international. It can be even within the domestic groups as well. So there could be subcultures involved, and we all know about that. So therefore, again, even whether it is international or domestic, it affects the thought process for the person. And when I'm talking about the thought process, ultimately, you see, we all know the basic principle or the basic jurisprudence of mediation is empathy. It is a one step above sympathy. So how does a person empathize with the parties or with the issues in the conflict when he or she, as a mediator, is not experienced or does not have the knowledge or exposure to different values or different culture of the parties involved? So according to me, if a mediator has to be a successful mediator, for that matter, a wise mediator, and to be empathetic, he or she must understand the cultural aspect of the conflict. And it is not only major issues into that, but I think even the small things, like, let me give an example. I mean, it's a universal understanding that man should never cry. That's a very universal fact. However, I mean, that's very natural of a person as a man to cry. I mean, in case of caucuses, I have seen that because of uh, the situation uh, of the conflict. Now, if a mediator is not conscious of this fact, or if the mediator is still into this understanding of the man should never cry, it could lead to a very different situation in that mediation. If one of the parties, a man, is crying and explaining his side in a caucus. So likewise, I mean, this is just a very simple example to understand the importance and intricacies of cultural aspect in mediation. And I think it is the right time now for all of us to appreciate the importance of this issue in mediation and try to inculcate this aspect when we are mediating as a mediator, especially when there are intercultural issues involved. More so, as I said, it will definitely be helpful to uh, understand more clearly the positions and interests of the parties involved, and therefore to facilitate them and lead them to a correct path of resolution, which is ultimately is what the goal of mediation is, which is a win-win situation. And that situation can only be achieved if the person sitting as mediator is aware of, is appreciating the values of culture in mediation. And I think that's exactly is what we should be striving forward. And it also, in a way, as I said, affects the thought process. And when ultimately in mediation, as we all know, it has been said that mediator has to be an active listener. Now, it it just does not means only listening. It means that while you are listening, you are also forming your thoughts inside your mind as a mediator. And this is where the situation could arise that what you have listening and you're forming a thoughts, but because of your cultural experience or the cultural backgrounds, there could be conflicts within your mind as mediator between two thoughts. And that could also lead to a very different situation, which may not be appreciative by the parties, or at least one of the parties, and that could lead to an unsuccessful mediation, which nobody wants as such. At least not the parties who had reposed so much trust in the mediator to help them resolve the dispute. So, as I said again, all it's very important. It has a very critical importance in mediation because it forms a person's thought process. And that exactly is what is getting involved when you are trying to facilitate the parties to arrive at a mutually agreeable resolution, because your thought process is getting involved with the thought process of the parties when there is a when there's a conversation or dialogues going on in mediation. And this thought process ultimately coming from your cultural background. So therefore, it is very important to understand and appreciate the culture, different cultures, uh, you know, to especially from for the mediator to help parties to arrive at a win-win situation. Now, having said that, let me just go back to Yasmin and ask her about her own experience uh, in this aspect of intercultural mediation. What she has experienced over a period of time with her own uh, teaching around, training people, or networking and connections. Yasmin, would you like to share your experience about this?
Yeah, thank you, Samir, and yeah, thanks for the explanation. I really enjoyed it as well. And you mentioned a very important and illustrative case or example about the masculinity versus femininity and what we expect in different cultures about a man crying. And it reminded me of a situation also about the role of men and women in society, in different societies, and that led in a mediation case that I mediated to an escalation. So the situation was there was a Dutch family, and it was a lady, and she lived by herself. She was divorced and had a boy who was not always at home. And there was another family, and they had an Arabic background and Muslim, and they lived upstairs, and they had children. So they lived together in the building, and like all the children do, they play around and they experiment with things. So the youngest one of 1 or 2, he used to throw stuff from the balcony, and it ended in her garden. And well, she said, "Well, can you clean it up?" to their neighbors, and they said, "Well, yeah, sure, we will clean it up." And so she asked that to the husband, to the father, the man of the family, when he was walking away, and he sent his son from 8 years old to clean her garden. And she filled it in like, okay, he sent it his son, so he doesn't take me serious, he's not respecting me enough, and he doesn't want to take his responsibility to clean it up by himself. And it escalated. And another thing was the tolerance became lower. So different things came up, like noise, different cases. It escalated. And during the mediation, because I knew the differences between culture and the roles, I asked the man, "Oh, is that why did you do that?" And because my experience is also like it can be inappropriate if you go as a man into the house alone of a lady. So it can be out of respect. And as you mentioned, Samir, earlier, that mediation is about active listening. But in some cases, I have my own style and I intervene more active by giving examples. Because for the man, it's also not obvious to mention that in his culture it's different, or how he feels it in his culture, and that it's relevant to explain that. So as a mediator, you can guide and ask more questions or give an example. And I see giving examples or sharing my own experience as a way to subtitle the situation or create a third narrative that they can rely or that they can relate to. So he told me yes, and well, it is inappropriate. And so I said, okay, so it's out of respect. Yes, because my son, he is not a man yet. And I respect her by not going alone in her house. So it was not that I wouldn't take my responsibility, but out of respect. And that lady, she was flabbergasted because she thought, oh, that's in a million years not how I thought it was. So the situation wasn't changed, but the narrative changed because of intercultural intervention or giving an example or subtitling a situation and giving a voice to the other party. And yeah, the problem on that sub-element was solved at that point in time. And another thing you mentioned earlier, Samir, was about the thought processes and your own thought process with your own culture. And sometimes it is completely the opposite with your own values, like a concrete situation. And how to remain neutral in that situation as a mediator, and how to manage your own feelings or your own first reaction. For example, with cultural things and the role of a man or a woman or a child in another culture, it can be helpful to first of all to know it about yourself and to see it coming before you are in a situation like that, and also to ask deeper about the underlying values. So why is it that way? And in that way you can find or explore a universal concept and the motivation of why, and talk on a higher level, on a conceptual level where parties can find each other. And I think that is a way to create a more constructive and peaceful discussion in a subject. And you also mentioned about intercultural doesn't have to be international, because it can also be subcultural. But in a way, and that's right. And you mentioned the example about family businesses, family cases. But it's also in commercial cases or just business mediations, because when you have like a Shell or a bank or another institute, and they do a mediation with each other, who is the ambassador, who represents that institute, and that's also a person with his own glasses and his own perspective and perceptions. So it is again a vital tool for everyone in that way.
Thank you, Yasmin. I think you mentioned a very important aspect about cultural issues and mediation, and one of them which caught my listening, for that matter, is neutrality. And according to me, I think that neutrality at some point of time does get lost in mediation. I know there would be a huge debate and people will not agree with me. I understand and I appreciate their thought process. But personally speaking, at some point of time, and especially in my experience, most importantly during the caucus, there are more chances of it getting lost, or because of these differences, or because I would say of the uh, non-appreciative thought process of the mediator, especially when there are cultural issues involved. When the party is discussing about their own feelings or positions or interest in a caucus to a mediator, and if the mediator is not aware of or is not appreciative of those cultural values, uh, there is always a chance, or there is always a risk of neutrality getting lost in that mediation. And therefore, I mean, to me, it's more like you know, what do you call, sort of a myth, I would say. Though people don't accept this, I know the mediators around there would not agree with me, but this is my personal thought process, that many a times is just neutrality or impartiality is just a myth. However, it is important. I'm not denying that fact. It is definitely important that a mediator has to remain impartial, but in some situations, it is always helpful to help parties arrive at a mutual consensus by maybe remaining partial but giving an impression of impartiality. What are your thoughts on this, Yasmin?
Oh, that's a very important aspect. And if it's not received the right way and understand the right way, yes, there will be a big group of people that don't agree with you. But I'm not a part of that group, because it's totally logic, and you called it non-appreciative. I really like how you mentioned, or how you labeled it, because I think it's intercultural mediation, and every mediation is also about the attitude of the mediator. And if you're not aware of your appreciation of the differences and how you react on certain differences, it can create a big distance between the mediator and the parties. And in that way, it's not possible for the mediator to keep and remain, or to keep that safe space that is essential to speak for the parties, to empower, to feel heard and seen, etc. So, and yeah, your whole mediation will be less effective. And it reminded me as well about, you called it a myth, the myth of neutrality. And I think the awareness of the possibilities and impossibilities of neutrality for a mediator, that awareness is very necessary, because by claiming that you are neutral in every situation, you are blindfolding yourself and laying back, I'm neutral. So by creating an awareness, it's not about it's not a bad thing. It's just the awareness and creating like a sensitiveness for some situations where your own background might involve and might disturb the safe space that you try to create in a mediation session. So it's more about also about self-awareness, I think, and a part of emotion regulation. And yeah, what do you think, Samuel?
No, you're right, Yasmin. I think it does have an impact on the neutrality aspect, but ultimately it all depends upon the mediator. How good he or she is able to control the his or her own thoughts while sitting there as a mediator. Now, taking further this discussion on
I think there's an issue with the connection of Samir, and he will be back in a minute.
In the meantime, while we wait for him to rejoin us, if anybody in the attendance have any questions, they can be asking you, Ms. Yasmin.
Yeah, I see one question in the group, and does one have to be a lawyer in order to become a mediator? It depends on what type of mediations you want to do. If you want to be a legal mediator, it can be handy to have a legal background. For example, I studied law before I became a mediator, but for mediation in general, I think it's more important to have proper education on how to be a mediator. So it's not a necessary thing to be a lawyer before you can be a mediator.
I'm so sorry about that brief disturbance about that. So what I was about to ask you, Yasmin, is which is a leading to what we were discussing. Don't you think that this leads to a very another aspect of why don't we have a concept of co-mediation, which is of course growing in many parts of the world, but it's not that aggressively being followed. But I think now, because of this cultural aspect, what we just discussed, don't you think that it would be a very uh, important process to promote co-mediation, especially when there is cultural diversity involved in mediation?
Thank you, Samir. I'm very, very happy that you mentioned this because I think it is the antidote for your blind spots as a mediator about your, like for one, the sensitivity, if you are still exploring that more and being more cultural sensitive, but also about your internal process, as you mentioned before, and how to cope with that process and to manage that. You can. It's very good to do it with someone else, with of course a different perspective, a different background, and in that way you create more checks and balances in a way, and more qualitative control, or I don't know how you mention it, but yeah, it can tackle different situations. Yes.
Thank you for giving that thought process, sharing your thought process on this. And I also believe that when especially in case of issues where there in conflicts, when there are diversities of thought process being involved, and especially from the cultural angle, it is always advisable to, if as a mediator you feel that you don't have that kind of exposure or experience or appreciation or knowledge about the cultural issues in mediation in that particular conflict, then it's always better to suggest having a co-mediator with you to help you and help not only you as a mediator, but also most importantly the parties for a right way to move forward. And right way to at least may not move forward, but at least appreciate each other's positions and interests. That is what I would put in that way. It may not be always successful, but at least we should give a best try to help the parties, and the parties themselves should also be appreciative of this aspect of trying to understand each other's positions and interests. And that is where I think co-mediation can play a very important role so far as cultural issues are concerned. Having said that, I think we are just coming to the end of this session. And Yasmin, if you have anything more to share, then we
Yes.
may open the floor for the Q&A after what you have to say.
Yeah, thank you. Well, about the neutrality of the mediator, it reminds me of something else. What intercultural knowledge and sensitivity can bring to the table as a mediator, because the more knowledge you have and the more tools you have, the more doors open for you as a mediator. And in that way, you are talking not to parties to mediate a case, but to see what kind of solution is necessary for this matter. Like if someone has a hammer in his toolbox, only a hammer, he will attack every problem with that hammer. And with intercultural competence and knowledge, it opens more doors. For example, when you approach a case, you can approach it as a dispute manager, where mediation can be one option if necessary and if it's suitable for that particular case. But you're also aware of certain risks in the future. So you can have also and play a more an advisory role for companies, for multinationals, where you analyze certain situations and can recognize where are the potential risks and manage them beforehand. And one of the managing things, it can be an advice or change a policy or do pre-mediation, because in the end we want less disputes. It's better to it's better to it's better to reduce the conflicts, and with that also the risks and the cost that brings it with it. And the one other detail, maybe it's a bit abstract, but it makes you as a mediator, if you approach a case in that way, more neutral, because you're not talking about the case to mediate it, but you're talking about the case to resolve the conflict or the potential conflicts, and you don't have an interest of mediation. However, it can be an option. So you're just seeing what needs to be done, and you can be in that position if you have enough competences and proper education also on this matter.
Thank you, Yasmin. So let me just try to summarize today's discussion, what we had, in this way, and that is that if you, as a mediator, wants to be empathetic, then you must be sympathetic to the cultural diversity. Thank you very much.
Thank you both so very much for, number one, sacrificing your time to be with us today. There is one question which is in the chat, and it seems it is directed to you, Miss Yasmin.
Yinka, she asked about the example of the man and the lady and how I intervened in that situation, what a concrete question I did ask, if I understood it right. Well, sometimes it's good to listen as a mediator and to ask questions. And sometimes, and that's my personal style, especially in intercultural context, to guide more and to have a more proactive role. So what I did, and why I do that one step before, is because sometimes the other party doesn't know what information is relevant. So as a mediator that is sensitive to certain topics, you can mention or give an example about the right elements or the right buttons to push and guide the parties in their way. So what I did with the men is I gave an example. So I said, well, I know situations where unlike what the lady said, it's neutral. I don't agree with the one or the other, but I put it on the table where it is out of respect when you send your son that's not a man yet, so he's innocent, to a lady's house and to clean or to do what needs to be done, instead of going by yourself as a grown man, etc. And he reacted very positive and shared more about the background and about religion, and how it's perceived in the religion and the position of the women in the religion, that is very high and needs to be respected. So in that way, he was empowered to show more of himself.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. One of the things that I wanted to add was I think it's also crucial for you as a mediator to know your limitation. I remember the first time I had opportunity to mediate with somebody from another culture. And in that culture, for example, when the person says no, it is no. You cannot ask, why are you saying no, or what is the motivation behind that no. I did not know. And, just coming from my mediation training, I wanted to dig deeper to understand what was the reason behind that no. It did worse than good. And from that day, I realized that it is very important for you to know, of course, your limitations, and of course, to do your due diligence before you go into mediation to understand who are the parties you are mediating with, and that will give you an upper hand.
Thank you, Francis, for sharing this example, which is very important, and I totally agree, especially on the point when you pinpoint the importance of doing your due diligence, because by understanding who are the parties, you know what's important for them, and it can also be like to make an intercultural step, an intercultural thing where a no is very important, and how you can deal with that. And the second thing is also creating a safe space and build your relation with the parties where they trust you, and having the right attitude. So even if you go near to a line, I wouldn't say cross a line, but go near to an uncomfortable space for the parties, they will forgive you as a mediator, and with the right attitude and with the right relation.
Just one thing I would like to add, Francis, what you just said, and that's equally. I mean, what you said is really important, and that's why I'm just adding to what you just mentioned, is that many times I've seen that people misinterpret culture with religion and faith, and I think that's where the biggest mistake lies of the understanding, because culture is much beyond religion and faith. It's like it's like a universe, and so in that universe, uh, religion, faith, caste, creed, that all kind of diversities are there. So it's culture is the bigger umbrella, within which religion or faith may be are of course part of it, but they are not the same. And I think many times this mistake is being made both by the parties and to an extent the mediators themselves, and which can have a very totally adverse impact on the whole process of dispute resolution.
Thank you, Samir. Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you for this wonderful webinar. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time out of your day to come here and join this webinar, this wonderful webinar. We will have more webinars coming up, so keep an eye out. And thank you once more, Yasmin and Mr. Samir, for coming here and speaking about this very insightful topic.